You have probably watched Frasier dozens of times, maybe hundreds. You think you know the show. You quote the alliterations, you remember the farces, you can still hum the theme. But hidden inside those polished episodes are 20 moments the writers never planned, the actors never rehearsed, and the editors decided to leave in any way. They've been sitting in plain sight for 30 years. Today, you finally get to see them. Number 20, the Cherries Jubilee Fireball nobody could replicate. The second season finale, called The Innkeepers, found Frasier and Niles opening their own restaurant, and the script demanded a kitchen disaster for the climax. Veteran writer David Lloyd, the same man who wrote the legendary Chuckles Bites the Dust episode for the Mary Tyler Moore Show, designed the scene with director James Burrows. The brothers had each secretly doused the Cherries Jubilee in brandy throughout the night, neither knowing the other had done it. When Roz finally lit the dish, the explosion was supposed to be controlled. It was not. Perry Gilpin staggered onto the dining room set with smoking hair and singed clothing, delivering her line about a big blue flash and cherries everywhere. The reactions captured on camera from Kelsey Grammer and David Hyde Pierce were not performances. They were real exhaustion mixed with genuine alarm at how big the practical effect had actually become. Burrows reportedly kept the take because nobody wanted to risk lighting it again. The audience did not know what they were laughing at, and that confusion became part of the comedy. But the fireball was nothing compared to what one cast member did during a season 1 farce, when she headed the wrong direction in front of a live studio audience. Number 19, Daphne storms off toward the wrong bedroom. In the 15th episode of season 1, called You Can't Tell a Crook by His Cover, Jane Leaves had to deliver a furious speech to Frasier and Martin about meddling in her dating life. The blocking required her to march off in outrage toward her bedroom and slam a door. On the take that aired, she walked confidently down the hallway, leading to Frasier and Martin's wing of the apartment instead. Kelsey Grammer instantly leaned into the slip with a line about it being a perfect exit if her bedroom had actually been down that hallway. John Mahoney was visibly suppressing laughter behind him. Daphne walked back across the living room and exited the correct way. For decades, fans debated whether the moment was real or written, and the Frasier Online Forum has been split since the early 2000s. What is documented is that whether the original misstep was genuine or staged, the recovery itself was Grammer in real time, demonstrating the same instinct that made him refuse to rehearse more than once. Speaking of his refusal to rehearse, that habit produced the single most legendary tongue slip in the entire 11-season run. Number 18, the night Frasier accidentally became Flasier. The second episode of the 11th and final season was titled A Man, a Plan, and a Gal, Julia. In the cold open at Cafe Nervosa, Frasier was supposed to deliver a tightly alliterative speech about leaving behind the old fault-finding, flaw-fleeing Frasier, and emerging committed to commitment. Kelsey Grammer's tongue gave out halfway through, and what came out was Frasier. David Hyde Pierce's eyes lit up immediately, and he pivoted into character as Niles, calling his brother out for the slip. Grammer denied it with a wounded dignity only Frasier could summon, claiming he had pronounced his own name correctly for 40-odd years. The exchange was kept exactly as it happened. According to IMDb's episode trivia, the rewrite to formalize the moment came afterwards, but the original mistake was preserved verbatim. What makes the scene work is that Niles seizing on a Frasier flub is exactly the sibling dynamic the writers had spent a decade building. Reality matched the script so perfectly the script absorbed reality. And just minutes later in the very same episode, Jane Leaves would crack on camera in a way the editors decided was too good to remove. Number 17, Jane Leaves visibly breaking during a choking scene. Later in that same season 11 premiere, Felicity Huffman's character Julia began choking violently at the dinner table during what was supposed to be a tense family meal. Martin, Niles, and Daphne all failed to react with anything close to appropriate urgency, simply sitting there as the woman gasped for air. Frasier finally exploded in defense of the woman he had been secretly falling for across the previous storyline. His outburst built into a roaring confession that he loved her, delivered at full theatrical volume by Kelsey Grammer with the kind of operatic intensity only Frasier Crane could justify. In the wide shot, Jane Leaves can be seen losing her composure entirely behind him. The corners of her mouth trembled visibly. Her shoulders shake faintly under the dinner table lighting, and she has to angle her face downward toward her plate to hide the smile creeping uncontrollably across it. The line itself was carefully scripted by the writer's room. Leaves's reaction to Grammer's thunderous delivery was not. Her corpsing made it into the final broadcast cut, because removing it would have required reshooting the entire wide angle from scratch. Cost in production, an additional taping night to schedule simply could not accommodate.
But Leaves was not the only cast member who could not hold it together when the script went fully physical, and the next entry features what is arguably the most violent prop malfunction in the show's history. Number 16. The hot and foamy disaster that soaked Niles. The 21st episode of Season 4, titled, Are You Being Served?, dropped Niles into emotional ruin after he signed his divorce papers from Maris. He retreated to the bathroom to splash cold water on his face. What happened next was an explosion of shaving cream, courtesy of Martin's malfunctioning hot and foamy device. David Hyde Pierce returned to the living room covered head to chest in white foam, eyes wide with despair. The scripted line came from Mahoney about the device exploding. The unscripted layer was the cast's inability to keep filming. According to the Frasier online forum, citing the NBC 200th episode special, Analyzing the Laughter, John Mahoney repeatedly broke during takes, which made Jane Leaves break, which forced multiple resets. The take that aired contains visible micro-expressions of Mahoney fighting laughter while delivering his theory about what happened. Director Gordon Hunt eventually settled for the cleanest available take rather than waste another canister of foam. The cast's real exhaustion bled into Niles's performed exhaustion, and the result felt more genuine than a perfectly composed version ever could have. But foam was not the only prop that nearly derailed an entire scene, and the next entry involves something far more delicate exploding far too early. Number 15. The champagne cork that detonated ahead of schedule. The 14th episode of Season 5 was The Ski Lodge, considered by many critics and the cast themselves to be the funniest farce the show ever produced. In one sequence, Frasier popped a champagne bottle as the romantic confusion reached its peak, and the cork released prematurely with explicit comedic timing. In Yahoo's 2016 oral history of the episode, executive producer David Lee admitted the moment was almost certainly improvised on set. Lee said he leaned toward thinking it was Kelsey Grammer's instinct, and that when the writers first watched the scene back together, every single one of them laughed. Lee himself questioned briefly whether the bit was too far for network television, but the writers' room consensus overruled him. Joe Keenan, who scripted the episode and won a Writers Guild Award for it, later attributed the staging instinct to Lee himself. Either way, what aired was not on the page when the table read happened. It was discovered during the week of rehearsals and left in because nothing the writers could have invented would have landed harder. The Ski Lodge generated several other documented improvisations that night, and the next one is arguably the most physical comedy David Hyde Pierce ever performed without choreography. Number 14. David Hyde Pierce vaulting over his own bed. Inside that same Ski Lodge episode, Niles realized Daphne might be on the other side of his bathroom door and rushed to declare his feelings. Rather than walk around the bed in his guest room, Hyde Pierce vaulted directly over the mattress. In the Yahoo oral history, Hyde Pierce was asked whether the move was rehearsed. His answer was telling. He said he could not remember exactly, but he believed it had emerged spontaneously during a rehearsal block. He then added that watching it back made him reflect on how much younger his body was at the time. The vault was preserved in the broadcast cut because director David Lee recognized that the visual told the entire emotional story in 1 second. It captured Niles's rare moment of physical abandon, the only time in 11 seasons he ever moved with that kind of urgency. The deer-watching scene later in the same episode produced a different kind of unscripted moment, this one not from the actors, but from the 400 people sitting in the audience risers above the soundstage that night. Number 13. The studio audience that laughed for 30 seconds straight. Still inside the Ski Lodge, the deer-watching gag arrived in the third act. Guy, played by James Patrick Stewart, was revealed to be eyeing Niles's behind rather than the wildlife outside the window, completing the episode's chain of romantic miscommunications. According to Stewart's own recollection in the Yahoo oral history, The studio audience laughed for approximately 30 consecutive seconds after the reveal. Sound editors had to trim the laugh down significantly because broadcast pacing could not accommodate that much dead air between dialogue beats. David Lee told the same publication that the writers proudly considered themselves laugh enthusiasts and that they almost never cut audience reactions short by choice. Hyde Pierce confirmed that the cold soundstage temperature on stage 25 at Paramount Pictures, kept deliberately in the high 50s Fahrenheit at Grammer's insistence, contributed to keeping audience energy elevated through long taping nights. Grammer's reasoning was that nobody wants to laugh when they are sweating. The audience that night was sustained by adrenaline and chilled air, but the loudest single laugh they ever produced came almost 6 years later in season 11, during a scene featuring a returning guest star nobody expected to remain so dangerous. Number 12. The Nanny G reunion that forced the mixers to lower the audio. The 15th episode of season 11 was titled Caught in the Act, featuring Laurie Metcalf as Nanny G, Frasier's secretly notorious first wife. Because the staging required complex prop work, the scenes were filmed in advance without an audience and played back on overhead monitors during taping night. According to the Frasier Wiki and IMDb's episode trivia, the studio audience laughed so violently during the playback that the audio engineers had to manually lower the laugh track in post-production to prevent it from drowning out the dialogue entirely. There is also a buried Easter egg inside the episode that almost no first-time viewer notices. The room where Nanny G attempts to seduce Frasier was dressed using portions of the original Cheers bar set, including the recognizable staircase that led down into the Boston watering hole. For longtime viewers of the parent series, the geography of the set was an emotional time capsule layered underneath a comedic scene. Director Pamela Fryman handled the staging delicately. But the most touching hidden moment in the entire run was not designed to be a joke at all, and it sits in plain sight in the cold open of an episode from season 9. Number 11. The Schubert tribute hidden inside a cold open. The 10th episode of season 9, titled Blasey Boy, opened with Niles seated at the piano playing a brief Schubert piece. Casual viewers heard a pleasant scrap of classical music. Longtime fans of the creators recognized something else entirely. The melody was the same theme used in the opening credits of Wings, the previous sitcom created by David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee, the same trio who created Frasier. The episode aired in early December of 2001, roughly 10 weeks after Angel and his wife Lynn were killed.